funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, more stimulus money coming to New Mexicans, but is it the best way to help ease the impact of inflation?
$500 is not going to change my lifestyle or probably yours either. But a lot of people, it'll make a big difference.
And what the repeal of Albuquerque's plastic bag ban could mean for water quality in the city. New Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm your host, Gene Grant. 1 week and millions of dollars later, recreational cannabis sales are off to a fast start around the state. The governor's office says medical and recreational sales topped $5.2 million in the first week alone, with a forecast of $318 million in sales by the end of the year. Our Line Opinion panelists will discuss what should be done with the tax revenue in about 25 minutes. With the weather getting warmer, water access is once again top of mind for much of the state. In the second half of the show, environment reporter Laura Paskus asks a national forecast hydrologist what we should expect heading into another dry summer. Stormwater in the city of Albuquerque could see some added plastic pollution, according to a Bernalillo County official. In about 20 minutes, we'll explain the potential impact of City Council repealing its ban on single-use plastic bags. People struggling to pay rent in the county are scrambling for assistance. That's after Bernalillo County ended its moratorium on non-payment evictions at the beginning of this month. In the second half of the show, we'll talk about the resources available and how to avoid a surge in eviction cases. The state legislature is trying to give some relief for other rising costs. Lawmakers passed a tax rebate plan during a special session that lasted less than 24 hours. That means money is probably coming to you in the next few months. Let's get to the line. Welcome to our line panelists this week. Hello to Serge Martinez. He's a professor at the University of New Mexico Law School. Next, we have attorney Sophie Martin. And it's always good to see attorney and former state representative Justine Fox Young as well. Thank you all for being here. Now, the state legislature wrapped up a quick special session just a couple days ago addressing inflation. The legislature's solution, $500 tax rebates to individual filers and $1,000 to married couples filing jointly. Now, half the cash will go up by the end of June, the rest in August. And tax filers would get the money automatically if you in your deposit if you do it electronically. Now, was getting through this special session smoothly and accomplishing this a success, both for Democrat leadership and hopes for future bipartisanship? Justine, let me throw that to you first. What was your take on our 12-hour special?
It certainly was smooth and almost a non-event news-wise. I guess if you look at it in the larger context, going back to the lawsuit over the $1.6, $1.7 billion in federal stimulus, which is kind of the way I see it, which really changed the tone because, of course, the governor had plans for how all that money would be spent, and a group of Republican senators and former Democrat Jacob Candelaria thought differently. I think that really set the tone and changed the parameters for what the governor's office could do and set things up for how this money would be spent down the road. And so I guess it was a bipartisan move to sort of, everybody kind of saved face. I think the governor was able to mitigate against some of the bad press and some of the challenges that she had coming out of the regular session with allegations that, her veto of the junior bill was political, et cetera. So I think it was all kind of muted and everybody comes out being able to declare victory. I don't really think I have a lot of optimism for bipartisanship going forwards, partly because I think the governor has tried, sort of in the vein of Bill Richardson-like maneuvers, to take control and be very dictatorial about the way these monies would be spent, both capital and money in the junior bill. And that didn't work. She had to step back and iron out a deal. And so I think it's a temporary sort of detente, and everybody comes out okay, but there's going to be another fight down the road.
I think you might be right. That's an interesting point there, Justine. Sophie, let me turn to you on that. That it's not all settled. Let's put it that way, what Justine's getting to here. And so this idea of what makes a successful special session, what word can we put on this? It was 12 hours. There were no big surprises.
Well, I mean, I think it could be called successful from some perspectives.
Sure.
It could have been 4 days instead of 1, and then
True.
that would have cost a heck of a lot more money. It could have been, as Justine intimated, I mean, it could have been a circumstance in which the legislature, including obviously the Democrats in the legislature, called it themselves. And, so the governor was able to save some face there and not having what would have at least appeared to be a full-on rebellion from her own members of her own party. And so that's successful. I think ultimately this will end up having been a little bit of a blip for the rank and file voter. Certainly within the political sphere, there's more to talk about here, but I think, is this going to have a big impact, for instance, on future elections? Probably not, because I think most communities or most citizens, et cetera, are going to say, but the money came through.
That's an interesting point. Good point there too. Serge, looking a little bit deeper at the content of what was accomplished. I mean, is this adequate action when it comes to inflation? Or, are there better long-term solutions out there? I mean, $500 is great, $1,000's great. What does it really mean at the end of the day?
Yeah, great question, Jimmy. Let me start by just saying the junior bill that got passed did have some funding for the law school that I will be happy to receive if the governor signs that. So just want to disclose that and say I thought that part was a great success. I think, $500, $1,000. I mean, for some families, it is going to be a huge deal, which is fantastic. And I'm a big fan of getting money to people with as few restrictions as possible to allow them to spend it how they decide they need it. But in terms of tackling inflation, no, this is just a blip. This is just the merest waving at an effort to try to address it. Excuse me. And so to some extent is a little bit of, for show. I think a real solution would be to provide real relief to folks in the form of, a longer, different plan to get more income into the hands of people who need it, more money, and to be able to really address the way that families and individuals are being hard hit by the current situation.
Serge, speaking of families, interesting little note here as well. It also included monies for undocumented immigrants who are, supporters say are also paying taxes and deserve the relief. Is that a generally agreed, yes? How about for you? Is that okay for you to have monies that way?
It's absolutely great for me. First of all, it's a bit of a myth that undocumented folks don't pay taxes, right? Many of them have money withheld from their wages all the time, every time they work, and they don't have any way to get at that because they're not able to access that system. But folks who don't file income tax returns still pay taxes in the form of sales taxes, their contributions to property taxes that are being paid. So it's a mistake to say these people are freeloading, right? And folks who don't earn enough money to pay taxes, that's the way a progressive tax system is supposed to work. And those are people who need help the most. So first and finally, where does this money going to go, right? We put this money into the hands of New Mexicans. Guess where it goes? Into New Mexico. This is a good thing. And I think it would have been a huge mistake to point fingers and say, we're giving out, a tax rebate or, money for you and you and you, but not for you because you're, just not right. This rising tide lifts all the boats, and all the boats in New Mexico need lifting right now.
If I could add one thing,
please,
if you don't mind. One thing that I wanted that really struck me though about the what Serge was just talking about with individuals who are undocumented who could access funds is that they are required to register for it, and that makes sense on some level. Like how does the state get the money to you if it doesn't know who you are and where you are? And at the same time, I do feel some concern that individuals who are living off the books, so to speak, may not wish to participate in that registration program, may not wish to notify the state who they are and where they are.
Mm-hmm. It's an issue here. It really is. And when there's not a lot of money to go around, people make interesting choices. Justine, again, I don't want to put you in the spot, always having to explain the Republican side of things, but I'm interested in this. There was only one Republican on the Senate side that was opposed to any of this, and not many on the House side either. And I hear your point a little bit earlier about it doesn't really bode anything for bipartisanship. Was this just a fact, I just need to get my money that I promised my constituents and get out of town? Was that basically what we're seeing here from Republicans as well?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for the caucus or for any individual members, or for I don't even know what the Republican Party is anymore.
Fair enough.
To be frank, but but I don't think there was anything terribly controversial. For the same reasons that Surge, supports. For many of the same reasons that Surge supports seeing the money go out to the public. I don't think that is a partisan issue at all. I mean, even people who believe in limited government think that the funds are better in the hands of individuals to make choices about what they need the money for. And I, for one, am glad that pot of money wasn't spent on some large recurring program that is going to require, future funds from tax coffers. So I don't think it was terribly controversial. I do think people thought they would score political points by handing out stimulus money. And of course, virtually every special session, everything is kind of greased beforehand. So I don't.
Justine, what do you make about the idea of letting these payments out on the timing? I mean, right around the primary on June 7th, and then the other checks coming around the general in November. Is that a political move? I mean, why not just give all the money at once?
Yeah, it is.
I love that answer. Serge, what do you think? Too political for words, or timing is just right? What do you think?
I mean, it's clearly too political. There's no such thing anymore as too political for words. But
right.
I mean, this is not subtle, and I'm okay with that in some cases, and this is one of them.
Sophie, there's been some talk out there that we could be, since we have so much money and potentially a lot of money coming in over the years, we could end up looking like Alaska at some point, where people end up getting checks annually from all this money. Could you ever imagine a scenario like that in New Mexico?
I mean, I can imagine it.
Yeah.
But those of us who have been here for some time know that our fortunes rise and fall. We've had some awfully lean years.
Yep.
And I think it would probably take a little while before this legislature was prepared to entertain something like that. Woohoo, money for everyone. Yeah, Alaska's program is really interesting, but
right.
I don't think we're there yet. We do still have things we need to fund in this state and that we need government to focus on. So I imagine that would be part of the debate there too.
Exactly right. Well, thank you all for that discussion. We'll check back in with you in less than 10 minutes to talk about the successes and the issues that came in the first week of legal recreational cannabis sales in New Mexico. But first, an expert perspective on the plan to send $500 to each New Mexican. I'm pleased to be welcoming Dr. James Peach, Professor Emeritus from New Mexico State University, where he taught economics and international business for a number of years before retiring. Congratulations on your retirement, first of all. Got a couple of questions for you, Dr. Peach. I'm really interested. I want to ask you about the outcome of the special session just wrapped up this week, the decision by the legislature to send either $500 or $1,000 to singles or couples out there. Filing jointly, the goal in the session was to ease the burden of rising consumer costs. Does this do that in your view?
It could help, and it's a far better thing to do this than have additional tax cuts. We will need the tax revenue at some point, given the volatility in oil prices.
Is that number acceptable to you? Did you have a number in your own mind that you thought, well, maybe this might help? Is $500 appreciably good in your view?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. That'll be a big help for a lot of people, especially at the low end of the income distribution. $500 is not going to change my lifestyle or probably yours either. But a lot of people, it'll make a big difference.
In comparison, the move is along the same lines, of course, as the federal stimulus checks we received last 2 years. But those didn't stop the inflation we're seeing now. Are there any precautions we can take now to help prevent a future spike in inflation?
There's very little that can be done at the state level, almost nothing. At the federal level, the measures that are being taken by the Federal Reserve, raising interest rates and reducing the balance sheet of the bank, it may help a little bit. A lot of the inflation has to do with things that are not in the typical bailiwick of monetary policy, and that includes oil prices, energy prices, which have been affected dramatically by the war, Russia's war on the Ukraine, and automobile prices, which a lot of that is due to a supply constraint on chips. And food prices are, of course, going up. And a lot of that has very little to do with policies that have been enacted.
What could bring down inflation in your view at this point? Like you mentioned, there's a lot of factors out there causing this kind of pressure. Is there any one thing we can look to ease inflation at this point?
A good part of the inflation in the CPI is due to two things. It's due to energy and it's due to the increase in automobile prices. As the chip shortage eases a little bit, and there are signs that that's going to ease, automobile prices should at least quit rising as rapidly, and that'll have an effect on used car prices. Energy markets are always volatile. That's the whole history of the oil industry, is volatility in crude oil prices. And there's very little that we can do. At the national level, the administration has announced the 180 million barrels, a million barrels a day for 180 days for release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. That's not going to affect international prices for crude oil very much.
We are seeing a little bit of price drop, though. What do you attribute that to?
You know, oil markets are so touchy these days that even slight changes in crude oil stocks, slight changes in rumors. West Texas Intermediate hit briefly $130 a barrel one day about 3 weeks ago. And today we've got $95 oil. It's a remarkable thing how those markets can change on rumor, sometimes on fact, but what we can expect in the future is continued volatility.
Dr. Pietsch, when can we see some relief here in your view? This is my last question. On inflation, prices, everything else, what's out there that's going to give us some relief, and when?
Well, I think some of the pressures that we've been talking about, energy and automobiles, some of that will go away probably by the end of the summer. And I would think certainly by the end of the year we should have be well on our way to returning to some sort of better outlook on inflation.
Dr. James Pietsch, Professor Emeritus, New Mexico State University, thank you very much for our quick time today. Hopefully we can stop in with you and discuss this as the summer and the end of year gets a little bit closer to see where we are. But we appreciate your time today.
It's not just simply, oh, there's less snow, so we have less water. There's other processes in play here related to forest transpiration and evaporation and soil moisture conditions coming into a season that seem to be exacerbated recently with multiple years of dry conditions.
The City of Albuquerque's ban on single-use plastic bags is no more. City councilors originally voted to repeal the ban last month before Mayor Keller vetoed the move. Then earlier this week, council voted to override the veto, wiping the ban from the books, citing extra costs for consumers and businesses. But environmental groups say it's a step backwards. And as environment reporter Laura Paskus shows us, water officials worry it could lead to an increase in pollution.
That photo behind you, can you describe what we're seeing there?
So that is a stormwater outfall. I believe this one belongs to the city of Albuquerque, but the way the stormwater systems work in our area, like in the greater Albuquerque metro area, we have a lot of interconnected. There are places that are unincorporated Bernalillo County, places that are city of Albuquerque, places that have NAFCA, the flood control authority, belongs to them, and they all interlink. And so that we go in, it goes Bernalillo County, goes into the city, then goes into NAFCA, then goes into the county, then goes back out, right? So even though this particular, it's very complicated, the systems are all tangled up together. So this particular outfall belongs to the city, but it likely has inputs from lots of different entities that are covered under this permit. And so this outfall goes directly to the Rio Grande. And what you are seeing is there's a bit of a screen on there, and it's caught some of the plastic bags. Plastic bags tend to be one of the biggest contributors to plastics pollutions, along with cups, polystyrene, packaging, all sorts of plastics that we have in our stream of waste.
So a couple of weeks ago, the Water Protection Advisory Board wrote to Albuquerque officials urging the city council to reconsider its earlier repeal of the ordinance. And in that letter, they wrote that the city collects annually the city collects and disposes of about 5 semi-truckloads of plastic bags from drains. And they wrote that doesn't include the plastic bags that are collected from drains by other entities. Is that an accurate picture of the scale of this waste?
Yeah, so we, all of the entities that have stormwater systems, we clean them out. We have to collect this waste, and we all track it as part of regulations under this permit. And that's pretty accurate. A large portion of the material that's collected is sediment and other things like that. But, plastics are a big part of that debris, the trash portion of it. So plastic bags, cups, water bottles, packaging, all of that is there. And then it breaks down. And so even though a large portion of that is sediments, you may have a lot of what we call microplastics in there, because those plastics break down over time when they're exposed to sunlight and become smaller pieces. So that becomes part of that waste stream as well that gets into our rivers.
Yeah, can you talk about that a little bit more? We see, the visual behind you is very obvious. We see plastic bags stuck to cactus and fences and all over the place. But what about those bits that we can't necessarily see? What's the problem with those?
So those plastics, when plastics start breaking down, they leach out toxins in there. There are various types of toxins. It depends on the type of plastic. There are lots of different chemicals, but we know that a lot of them really impact human and wildlife health, and they're linked to cancers and endocrine disruptors and hormonal disruptions, and all there's all sorts of things that we've linked these toxins and plastics to, and so that gets into the water. It gets in when it becomes smaller pieces. Animals can easily eat it. The real big problem with that, obviously there's some toxins in there, but also their bodies, we can't digest plastic. So what ends up happening is those plastics just get lodged in their digestive system.
I feel like our city's plastic bag ban was complicated because it was passed in 2019, but then it was kind of pulled back because of the pandemic and just so much uncertainty at the beginning of the pandemic in particular. But do you have a sense of how something like the city's plastic bag ban can reduce this waste stream that you're having to deal with?
Yeah, I think you can look, there are studies that have been done in other cities that have had plastic bag bans. And so, for example, the city of San Jose saw a reduction in plastic bag litter from what had been 12% of their floatables or their trash debris in 2010 to 4% in 2012, just from having that plastic bag ban. And that's considerable. And we're seeing that in other places. Bay Area has done a lot of studies. You can look at those, but a lot of the places that have these bans, we do see a significant reduction in plastic waste.
$318 million. That's the number Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham expects recreational cannabis sales to reach by the end of the year after what she calls a successful opening weekend for legalization. If that estimate pans out, the state would receive millions in tax revenue, sending even more cash to local municipalities where shops are up and running. Now, let's welcome our line panel back for a look back at opening week. $5.2 million on opening weekend, almost 3.5 of that recreational use. Predictions of more than $300 million in the first 9 months. Is the governor, Sophie, the right to be celebrating these numbers? Is she on the right track here?
I can't predict exactly how sales will work, and my experience outside of the cannabis industry is that you often will get a bump on your opening weekend.
Right.
Woohoo! So it's not not able to do the full projections myself, but it does seem like it was a promising start, and I think it has been interesting. A lot of coverage about this has really focused on the border with Texas, which is the largest state that does not allow cannabis. Doesn't have legalization within the state, and here we have that nice border. I'm sure folks in Clovis are happy right now about those sales.
Serge, interesting. The word transparency comes up here with all this money coming in. Do we have enough transparency on how this money is either being received, how it's going to be spent? What's your gut telling you at this point?
Transparency is not something that comes to mind with this, right? We do know that it's bringing in a lot of money and probably raising folks' expectations for what we can expect. But I've not been clear on how it's being accounted for and how it's being distributed or what's going to happen. There's just, like Sophie said, woohoo, there's a lot of money. And I'm not going to complain about that. But I do think there's, this is barely a year since they passed, not even a year, right? Since this was passed, and we're very, very much at the beginning stages of seeing how this plays out. I'm optimistic, but I do think it's a little bit too soon to say, yes, this has solved lots of problems and we'll all be able to be happy and see how this goes out. Just in terms of, the licensing and seeing how it's been, micro growers rather, have been, making noise about being left out and having unfair or unreasonable obstacles raised, right? We're so very much in the infancy stage of this, and so much needs to be worked out. I feel that declaring that this is going to change is like a baseball team winning its first 2 games and saying we're on pace to go 162-0 or whatever.
Right.
Thank
you, Serge. I couldn't agree more. Justine, interestingly, I appreciate that Serge just brought up micro producers, because one of the lingering concerns for disadvantaged facing, these businesses aren't allowed to have more than 200 full-grown plants at a time. They aren't allowed to buy wholesale product to sell back to the public. What does this mean for smaller businesses trying to compete with big money operations that we know are putting the clamp down on right now?
Well, I think that remains to be seen. First, though, on the big picture, I am ready to declare victory. I think here the Democrats have hit on a renewable green resource. And with estimates like this, I think we found a way to pay for all the free college that nobody knew how to plug that hole. And then, hey, all these stoner college kids are going to have money jingling around in their pockets, and they can buy more weed. And I think the governor has unwittingly hit upon a self-sustaining economic model with a renewable resource. I don't know. Obviously, a lot remains to be seen.
Yeah.
And I think, Gene, you hit on as far as the mechanics are concerned, exactly what the real issue will be as new producers get in the game and we see what will really work. And this has always been the issue with the marijuana program, whether it's medical marijuana or now recreational. How does the government engineer all this and still let the market work? You know, I would say, given that we've been working on this for 23 years,
right,
you know, since Gary Johnson came out, and
very good point,
and a whole bunch of legislators at that time were ready to go forward with it. We seem to be struggling with the same problems over and over again, and so I guess I'm not that optimistic that we are going to see a really robust market in place,
right,
and see the kinds of returns that are predicted. But I hope that the market is allowed to operate.
You know, I appreciate that point. And Sophie, let me continue on. The market also includes others who are not quite so official, if you get my drift here. And I'm interested to see, as the weeks go by, if our market of New Mexico gets flooded with cheap, you know, cannabis, illegal cannabis, not through our state stores, and what that does to pricing and demand and all that kind of a thing. It's going to be very interesting as the weeks go on here to see what's going to happen. But let me ask you this: with so much money headed to the state, so was enough thought given to creating that same opportunity for Native tribes here? Are in your sense, are they getting in on the largesse at this point, like everybody else?
Well, I mean, I think it's important to note that the tribal properties fall under federal marijuana law.
Yep.
And so there is a real distinction there between what's possible on non-tribal lands and what's possible on tribal lands. And so, I mean, I think that is a real, it's something that folks need to keep in mind. It's a real issue. The other thing I did want to bring up, and I think this will have impact both, it'll have impact on non-tribal, but also on tribal lands, is the decriminalization element and the expungements that we're going to be seeing of past criminal records relating to marijuana possession. And so, I mean, I think that's going to be a big relief as that rolls out and as those expungements happen. And I should say less of an issue because of tribal law issues, but certainly within the state, those expungements are going to be huge.
Yep. Hey, Serge, we got to get in law enforcement in this discussion. There's no doubt, you know, there's concern out there. You're going to have people behind the wheel, you know, even more addled, if I can use a word here, than before. And the other idea, of course, is that, you know, officers are going through training, you know, what to look for. How, you know, they need to be a step ahead of this, don't they? You know, this just can't happen in isolation without law enforcement being ready to do their thing.
You know, I'm a little bit unsure about that because it is not like cannabis was not here in New Mexico before, right? And I wonder how much overlap there is between the group of people who were cautious enough to wait for it to be legal, but then are cool with driving, well, you know, after being under, using cannabis, right?
Gotcha, yeah.
I mean, but that said, you know, fairly recent study I saw out of Colorado said that like 40% of the recreational users they asked thought cannabis didn't impair their driving at all, right? And so it is a problem. I don't want to, you know, poo-poo it, right? That the more available it is, the more socially acceptable it is, the more people have experience with it, and start to say, oh, this isn't an issue.
Can I throw in that, you know, legal marijuana is much stronger than a lot of street weed. I mean, if you can buy 2 ounces at a time, you know, there's a lot of people out there who sit there and just try to pound weed, and you've got a problem suddenly.
Yeah, and you know, and I think it is. I mean, you know, the person who figures out a really, you know, solid, reliable test for this is gonna be in a good place. But I do think it is important to be aware and increase, you know, education about you actually don't drive better when you're high, and that, you know, and that you can. It's not just about alcohol, but also making sure that, you know, use is not impairment, just like with alcohol. You know, there's a difference between going to the bar and having a glass of wine and pounding shots, right? And the same with, you know, with cannabis. And I don't envy this task, but it's important to try to make sure we get it right and focus on not just saying anybody who uses is therefore, in the sights of law enforcement and whatnot,
Right.
because it's decriminalized for a reason.
That's right. Hey, Justine, we also had a situation, more than a dozen students needing medical attention after apparently accidentally eating some edibles. I mean, is it going to education for parents? What has to happen here to keep something like that from happening again?
I mean, I hate to be negative about it. I think we've done all the education you can imagine on alcohol use, and that hasn't done a whole lot with our alcohol problem in the state. Mm-hmm. I just think all the problems that you point to, these are issues that come out of governmental regulation. We have a partial decriminalization. We have the government interfering. I mean, you talked about street weed didn't do this to people. Right. And now we're in a situation where we do have really a very strong substance, and it's going to be highly available. I think it's got to settle out. I mean, it's a complicated problem where you've got the black market, you've got this new legal market, and everybody's trying to work it out. And things like this are going to happen. And in a year or so, I think we'll be sitting here realizing that it's calmed down and it's not so new, and people will figure out how to manage it. Mm-hmm.
Justine, it's taxed pretty heavily, and there's more tax coming on it as the years go by. Is there a point of no return on price when it comes to legal cannabis, where it's just too much and the black market's just ready, waiting?
Absolutely, there is. You're going to have diminishing returns. I don't know exactly where that point is. I'm sure that studies out of Colorado have revealed that, and out of Washington and Oregon, and also as we see the proliferation around the country, where it's that's going to change the local markets where it just becomes so widely available. Mm-hmm. But yes, it's going to diminish, and so that's why I don't put a lot of stock in these estimates.
Yeah, interesting point there. Not everyone's going to go out and spend $200 every 2 weeks on this stuff. We're going to be keeping a close eye on all the developments surrounding legalization. Also, be sure to listen to the New Mexico PBS podcast, Growing Forward, made in collaboration with New Mexico Political Report and KUNM. Co-hosts Megan Kemrick and Andy Lyman explore the potentially wide-ranging impacts of legalization, including a criminal expungent recently mentioned, water rights, and the carbon footprint of indoor grow operations. You can find Growing Forward anywhere you get your podcasts. Now, we'll be back with one final discussion on evictions in just about 10 minutes. We're all happy that spring is well on its way. Things are really starting to green up and bloom out there, which means it's time to pay even closer attention to the Rio Grande's spring and summer flows. Environment reporter Laura Paskus checks in with a forecast hydrologist to see what's happening with snowpack and downstream river flows this spring. And as he tells us, normal doesn't mean the same thing it used to.
Angus Goodbody, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
Thanks. So the NRCS, that's the Natural Resources Conservation Service, issues spring forecasts for western rivers, including the Rio Grande. How does the Rio Grande look this spring?
This spring, we're looking at below median stream flow for most of the watersheds in the Rio Grande. It depends a bit on which part we're talking about. As a whole, the main stem down in central New Mexico is expected to have a little less than 70% of median. And that would be for the April through July runoff period. But there is quite a bit of variability. The good news is that the headwaters in Colorado probably are in the best shape right now. So still not at median or typical values, but not so far below.
So when you're compiling these forecasts, what are the different factors you consider?
So our forecast modeling system it's a statistical method that we use. We also work in conjunction with NOAA National Weather Service, and they use a process simulation model. So we actually have a few different sources of information available to us. I'll talk about the NRCS modeling system, though. Again, we really rely mostly on historical and current observations of snowpack and precipitation. And we collect most of those data through the SNOTEL network, which is our high elevation mountain ground-based observing system.
And so can you talk about how snowpack relates to stream flow, and also how that has kind of changed?
Sure. So, in a lot of the Western U.S., we depend on water from the mountains, and that water is largely sourced as snowpack. So, accumulating through the winter, we tend to have deep seasonal snowpacks through a lot of the upper Rio Grande Basin, and also in New Mexico in the higher peaks of the Sangre de Cristos, and the other high mountains in that area locally. So the whole premise for being able to forecast is the fact that we do accumulate this snowpack high up in the mountain ahead of time, so we're able to assess exactly how much is up there, or at least an index of how much is up there. And then we know that is going to run off later in the springtime once the temperatures warm up, et cetera. So it's really based on that natural snowpack reservoir that can be measured in advance to give us an indication of what to expect later in the spring and summer runoff season.
One of the things that we've talked about a bunch on our show is how even a normal or above average snowpack doesn't necessarily translate to robust downstream flows. Can you explain why that is?
Sure. So, and this gets, you asked a little bit about the change too in the previous question. So there's no question that, the amount of snow we have in our mountains is changing, and has changed, considerably in the last few decades. We can detect that just with our ground-based measurements. There's also a feedback between how much snow is in the mountains and what actually runs off. And it's not just simply, there's less snow, so we have less water. There's other processes in play here related to forest transpiration and evaporation and soil moisture conditions coming into a season that seem to be exacerbated recently with, multiple years of dry conditions. So we have deficits entering the season that may be larger than what we're used to, even in the more recent historic record. So I will say, so if you think about less snow in the mountains, obviously that's going to mean less volume. It also can mean different timing of the runoff as well. And this is an issue because we have built our systems around an expectation of runoff at certain times of the year. So potentially, as we have warming and maybe more of the storms in the winter transition to more liquid precipitation rather than snow, we can actually have a similar amount of runoff, but coming at different times of the year. Now, that is not what we've been seeing in the most recent decade in the Rio Grande. In general, it's been just quite dry. So overall, the main forcer for runoff is going to be how much precipitation of any variety that we get throughout the year. And so as long as that remains low, we'll continue to have low runoff. I guess to talk more about the stream flow, and we have seen a significant reduction. Every 10 years, we update our stream flow normals. And basically that is a 30-year average and median that we calculate for the seasonal target periods that we forecast for. So again, that's typically either April, July, or March, July, or the standard target periods in the Rio Grande. And what we did see across the board in this recent update was less total volume of water running off during that time period. So our actual normals have lowered, which means that our interpretation of 100% of normal is actually less than it was for the previous 10 years.
I think so many of us want to know or understand how many good years would we need to ever catch up?
Honestly, if things were wetter in the Rio Grande, it wouldn't necessarily take that long to catch up. I mean, the big question is that actually going to happen? And again, I do tend to look to history. I know we're in a time of greater uncertainty with what the climate will be doing, in the next decade or decades. However, we can look back, particularly at our stream flow records, which in the Rio Grande area honestly go back 100 years or more in some cases, and get an idea of what have things been like in the past. So as I mentioned, we update our normals every 30 years. I've actually gone back 80 years and looked at 30-year increments through time to see what those cycles have looked like. And the reality is the Rio Grande has always gone through, long cyclical periods of wetter and drier periods. So in a sense, what we're experiencing now is not unprecedented. Of course, the reasons we may be experiencing may be unprecedented. So of course, that's the concern right now.
Life is slowly starting to move back towards a pre-pandemic normal, but unfortunately for some, that means a return to the harsh reality of non-payment evictions. Bernalillo County ended its moratorium on April 1st for the first time since the beginning of the pandemic. Let's bring in the Line Opinion panel to talk about the impacts of this. We're still waiting to see what landlords do in the next few weeks, but we know there were a few dozen eviction hearings scheduled at Metro Court in Albuquerque. Now that's according to Source New Mexico. Here's the question. Are landlords, Sophie, going to rush to evict tenants now that this stay is over?
Well, I think it's worth noting that while evictions have resumed in some parts of the state, there is kind of a rolling resuming. So each month on the 1st, we're going to see more parts of the state where the moratorium is lifted. We haven't, from what I understand, seen a mad rush to the courthouse. That doesn't mean that it won't happen. And it may be that in some areas of the state that the backlog, for lack of a better way to put it, is more intense than in others. It's hard to say right now. But, actually, I will say one of my fellow panelists gave a great interview recently about this, and talking about how much of the eviction backlog may have already kind of run its course. It may have gone through the system because there were other ways to remove tenants, even if you couldn't do it on the basis of non-payment. So I'm going to kind of throw that to Serge.
Serge, go ahead. That's an interesting little point there.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's a mistake to say, a misapprehension that I think a lot of folks have, that there were no evictions over the past 2 years. There were thousands and thousands of evictions. They just weren't for non-payment in court, right? You could get evicted for violating the lease in some other way, or the landlord could just say, I'm not renewing this lease, and you have to get out, right? How many thousands and thousands of New Mexico families lost their homes because of that? We don't know. They never went through the eviction courts because as soon as the Supreme Court stepped in, which, by the way, more power to them, I appreciate their focus on this, right? It no longer became this efficient eviction machine, and so you have to look to other avenues. But if we're saying, the dam is about to come down and there'll be a wave, I don't think that's the case, because there's been a lot of leaks in the dam over it's more like a fence for the last couple of years, that has allowed anybody who has a little bit of savvy to get rid of just about any tenant they wanted to get rid of, for any, even if they had to sort of disguise the actual rationale.
Right. Hey, Serge, let me stay with you on this. It's kind of a big deal. The U.S. Attorney General, Merrick Garland, recognized your department, UNM Law, for its rapid response addressing the pandemic housing and eviction crisis. Can you tell us what that honor was like, and what you, your colleagues, and your students, what did you guys do to help keep people housed?
I mean, we were really honored to get that recognition, and really excited that there's been so much focus recently on housing stability and the role that lawyers and law professionals and law students can play in helping people remain stably housed. I'll be honest, we were doing this before the pandemic. We're going to keep doing this, right? We sort of increased our efforts to try to work with folks around the state around getting folks access to the assistance that there is, and making policy change. But housing was there was a housing crisis before the pandemic and post-pandemic, and we're still working on it. But it's always nice to have your work recognized. And my amazing students have been, thrown themselves into this from day one of them hearing about this, but especially, in the first couple of weeks of this pandemic, they were like, what can we do? How can we do it? And the cast has changed, but the spirit of diving in and trying to make sure folks don't lose their housing in this time hasn't let up. I've been really proud of them.
Good for you. Congrats to you and all your colleagues and the students on that. That's kind of a big deal. Good for you guys. Yeah, absolutely. Justine, a question here. For those people who are facing eviction, there is federal assistance available. We all know that. And we all know if it goes unused, the state has to return that money to Washington. So my beef here is there enough knowledge about what's out there? Should the city or state be doing more to let people know that there is help available? Because honestly, you look around Albuquerque, you really don't see a whole lot of paid sort of notices saying, hey, if you need help, come over here. Should we be doing more?
I mean, it's a little hard to know. And as Serge says, this is not a new phenomenon. It sounds like, and the hope is that maybe we've become a little bit more efficient at connecting people who need resources with resources. Maybe the government has gotten better at targeting folks who really do need help. Anecdotally, in my practice, I think that's true. I mean, I have had clients who have not had too much trouble getting assistance. And I think, and there's a report in the Journal today about funding going out. I guess it's a little too early to tell how much better we've gotten at it. But I do think, COVID has thrown a spotlight on this longstanding problem and difficulty. And I guess I hope that rather than just create a new entitlement for the sake of creating it or throwing money at the problem, that we are getting better at really identifying the best way to get resources to people. A moratorium is one thing, but actually figuring out how to help people get stabilized who need it. And people like, Serge's clinic and the lawyers and students and other folks who work on this and the experts in this area, I hope are getting heard, when it comes to the legislative fixes and changes, because the money needs to get in the right hands.
That's right.
If we're going to be spending it.
That's right. The idea of going back to Washington just gives me a stomach ache. We got to spend this money. Hey, Sophie, interesting. I'm pretty sure you know about this. There's an Albuquerque advocacy group calling for rent control. It's an amazing situation when you think about it here in Albuquerque. Should cities in New Mexico consider such drastic action? I mean, considering other rising costs?
Okay. So I will say rent control can be quite complex. And so I would say it's not a quick fix. It's not even necessarily a sure thing. We see in cities that have had rent control for a long time. New York City comes to mind almost immediately, that sometimes there are some unintended consequences. But given the scope of the problem, it seems to me that all options should be investigated and should be on the table. And that certainly is one of them.
Yeah. Serge, let me get you a cut on that rent control. I'm dying to hear your opinion on this subject.
Well, the first thing you'll hear when you talk about it is people say there's a state law that prohibits any municipality from implementing it.
That's right.
I've analyzed that, and I think that that's actually not consistent with the home rule provisions of our Constitution. And so I think, a municipality that wanted to, like Sophie was saying, try it and see, shouldn't take any options off the table, right? Rent control, it is, often a dirty word in some quarters, and certainly has had, you can, whatever position you want to support, you can point to evidence to that effect. But I do think it can be an effective tool to keep people, to stop destabilizing housing and allow folks to be able to stay where they are, build up, some political capital for where they are, have some stability that helps them with work, education, and whatnot, and to sort of decommodify housing a little bit. And so I'm certainly intrigued by it. I do know that it would be a massive, massive battle that anyone wanted to try it, but I do believe that there's legal cover for it, despite what our state statutes say about that.
See, that would be an interesting change of events, though. I think I've had this discussion with folks, and folks are convinced that the state would not allow it. That would be a very interesting change if your research shows otherwise. That's fascinating. Justine, let me kind of jump to you for a quick second here. Not just a New Mexico problem. Our state, just below the national average in its share of cost-burdened renters who devote about a third of their income to housing costs. Some people, it's just not sustainable to have so much of our money going to keeping a roof over our head. Is there a federal solution to this housing problem that kind of covers that a little bit?
No, I mean, it's a complicated problem that relates to our tax burden and the cost of living here. And, temporary Band-Aids, which never remain temporary, like rent control and changing the regulatory landscape, will only make it more complicated and destabilize housing in the long term. So no, I don't think there's a federal solution. I think we need to look back at all the traditional, ways to let the market work to permit job growth and, to deal with the social factors and influences that make it hard for folks to make it. I mean, it's a long list.
Yeah.
But no, the feds can't fix that problem.
It's complicated. That's right. It's equally, go ahead, Serge, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, I 100% agree with Justine that there has to be a complex response to this. And rent control is probably a short-term solution, and I understand what Justine's saying, right? Mm-hmm. Short-term is a myth in many cases, but that goes hand in hand with creating more housing, creating more public housing, creating more access to rental assistance and whatnot. And that no one thing is, there's no such thing as a silver bullet. It requires a complex, sustained, thoughtful, innovative approach to it. But I do think that there are ways to approach it. I've articulated thoughts and plans many times.
Sure.
And yet, as of yet, no one's followed up, taken me up on it.
Well, you're so far ahead of the game, man. We're catching up to you. That's what's going on here. Thanks again to our Line panel, as always, this week. Be sure to let us know what you think about any of the topics the Line covered on our Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram pages. I suppose the idea of kids in the not too distant future riding around in driverless electric vehicles while smoking cannabis isn't that far-fetched when you think about how quickly our way of life is flipping over. Free college, that's a thing now. That was pretty much unthinkable not too long ago. And that list of previously unthinkable is growing seemingly weekly. Cannabis legalization has arrived in a pretty healthy early haul for a state already bulging with cash. Now, it wasn't that many years ago we were considering the unthinkable to some, tapping our rainy day fund. And as you heard with the panel, we all have some sweet folding money headed our way to pay for gasoline. Was that even a remote possibility one administration ago? Things change. Or as the 80s pop star put it so well, money changes everything. Thanks again for joining us, for staying informed and engaged. We'll see you again next week in Focus.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by viewers like you.